What's that thing you once said or did that you still cringe at to this day? In 10th grade, a very attractive and nice girl in my French class who I'd gotten to know over that year asked me if I would like to leave class early with her and hang out. I don't know what I thought I was going to do if she didn't ask me, but in the moment I simply replied, "Why would I want to do that?" I remember she looked crushed as she walked away, and the guy who was sitting in front of me turned to look at me and shook his head in disappointment. She and I never really got along the same way after that. I'd love to go back and just say yes or to still be in touch with her today. Enough people said to go find her and talk to her. I found her Facebook and messaged her. She filed a restraining order. Not really, but I'll message her and update people what happens next. Dude, what? Hello? Story 2. We used to have weekly 20-minute silent reading sessions during my freshman year of high school, where we brought in a book of our choice. One time after the 20 minutes were up, my teacher had us go up to the whiteboard in turns and write down one word we came across in a reading that we were not familiar with. I wrote dumb. To this day, I seriously can't remember what book I was reading. Definitely wasn't anything inappropriate. The teacher did answer. After doing a double take and pausing for like 20 seconds to collect his words, lol, he told me it was a very dominating woman and left it at that. Looking back at it, I feel bad for the position I inadvertently put him in. Generally not something any male teacher wants to explain to his students. Story 3. Big fan of a certain DJ and a station I listened to via the internet. Got to write regular emails that he would read on air. I was witty. It was funny. Happened to plan a vacation that involved being in the same city as DJ. He told me I should stop by the station and meet him. I did. I never, ever thought at a billion years he would put me on air. And he did. And he asked me to read a promo for another DJ who was a difficult name. And I could not pronounce it. And I was desperately unfunny in the banter he tried to engage me in. My embarrassment went so deep that I felt it was almost having an out-of-body experience. This is not happening. It simply cannot be real life. It turned maroon. I soaked my clothes in sweat. I was shaking when I stood up to leave. But I survived. No, I was 40-something when this happened. And yes, he was in his 40s and knew my age. And bless him. He mentioned me in a nice way in the book he later wrote about his years as a DJ. Story 4. I grew up in a very white, very rural town. When I was in school, people from our town, because of the town name, were frequently referred to as beaners. I had zero clue this was a slur, and assumed it was along the lines of being called a Yankee as a northerner, not friendly but not offensive. Anyway, a beloved and coincidentally Latino faculty member passed away pretty unexpectedly. I wrote a tribute to his life, which was read at his funeral and published in various places that included the phrase, "For the man who made Beaner a compliment." It meant in the way that his excellence gave value to our town, with zero irony. I was well into college before I realized my mistake. And no, nobody corrected me. Story 5. Back when I was in high school, I was leaving Ireland to move to the UK. I admitted to my friend that I'd been in love. I was not in love at all, but I thought I was, with this girl in our class. She was all I ever thought about. As I was moving, I knew I would never see her again, but for some reason I wanted her to know how I felt. But I couldn't tell her myself. So I wrote a cringy note and left it in her bag one day. Then a few days afterwards, I texted my friend, telling him to tell this girl that I love her and will miss her very much. He texted back saying he showed the text to her. Her reaction was apparently not good at all. I felt completely miserable, but then whatever. I was moving away. 1 year later, we moved back. I was back in school, back in her classes. Yeah, I kinda never said a word to her for the next 3 years. I still dislike my young self. Story 6. In 6th grade, I had a crush on this girl, and so I followed her around on my bike at the homecoming pep rally at our town square. I was absolutely conspicuous, and her friends ran away one time when they noticed me once. And when I was riding around looking for her, I was stopped by a guy and his friends from a different middle school. He asked if I was following his girlfriend around. I said no, but he knew I had and said to stop because I was creeping her out. He ended up being friends with some friends of mine and told them about it. I didn't live that down for a long time. It makes me cringe every time I think about how lame I was. I have a whole list of awfully embarrassing middle school stories. Middle school. The years we all live to forget. Story 7. I didn't get to puberty at an early age. Needless to say, I was a bit behind in how to deal with the ladies. So, I got an internet girlfriend. Got my family to drive 900 miles to visit her for 2 days. A 48-hour cringe is what that trip was. It was so bad that when I was in the military, I could get out of trouble with my drill sergeants by telling tales of my awful dating experience. Take for starters, the fact that both of our families were meeting at a pizza place. I walked in, saw her, and ran back out of the restaurant and pretended like I didn't see her. I was so scared. Came back in, sat next to her, and was too afraid to make eye contact the entire time. My head was on a 90-degree swivel between my mom straight across from me and the soda machine to the left of me. You can imagine how the rest of this night went if I spent my first hour trying to work up the courage to look in her general direction. Now this girl, let's call her Shmessa, worked at an ice cream place. Her coworker had been teasing her that I was only traveling all this way to get some. So we go to her workplace, and first we see a guy that I've talked to before who's pretty cool. He says, "All right, nice to meet you," and tries to do a super cool bro handshake. I try to keep up, but I mess up about 4 times before he says, "Never mind, nice to meet you," and goes back to work. You can't imagine how embarrassed and scared I was from that alone. We go into the ice cream place. She orders, because I have to try a malt. Turns out it's basically a milkshake. I don't know. And then this guy behind the counter comes over to us and asks me, "So, did you get some yet?" "Huh? Did you get some yet?" "Oh, no, we're good. She just ordered." So stupid. He was asking if I got some, and here I am thinking he didn't just see us order. He laughs and walks away while she loses what dwindling respect remained for me. Well, super. The agenda from here is to go to her house where our families can powwow, then we have to check into our hotel room. Then Shmessa and I will be going to see a movie. Any movie. The family stuff is awkward, but I get through it without any major incidents that make me feel anxious. We go to the hotel room to check in, and my mom, probably knowing what an abysmal dork I am, has okayed me to get my own room. Score. If that wasn't me, that is. My stepdad was unaware and he was hesitant to let me do that, but reluctantly agreed. As luck would have it, my room is on the other side of the hotel from my parents. The sky's the limit. So it's time to unpack her stuff. Shmessa comes with me to my room, and just like any teenager, I panic and start trying to come up with anything to do. Be funny, be aloof, be random, do something quirky. I'm a mess. I hate to even admit this. All I can come up with is to get really excited about the hairdryer. Jesus Christ, it's been almost 10 years and I still cringe about this. I yell out to her about how great the hairdryer is. She should come look. I'm dumping water on the counter and this amazing stupid hairdryer is drying it up so fast. I can't possibly relate to you how bad I hate myself for this. Mission success. I've wasted enough time that it's time for us to leave for the movie. Being the inner neckbeard I am, I brought a sweatshirt along. Not because I need it, but because if she happens to get cold, what a suave hero I'll be when I say, "Here, take mine." We get to the movies, and as if on cue, she says, I'm kind of chilly." Well, it's about this time I noticed that I had forgotten the sweatshirt in my parents' car. I could have pulled her close to keep her warm, or even, not really, maybe you're just a coward. Would have gone even better than, "Oh no, I brought a sweatshirt exactly for this occasion." "It's fine." No, God, how dumb. I don't even need the sweatshirt I was going to bring for you, but I left it in my mom's car. The fact that I wasn't struck silent, that moment is proof that God is not merciful. As we're nearing the ticket counter, I realize that I have no idea how to buy a movie ticket. I've done it before, but I never thought about it, and now that I'm thinking about it, I have no idea what I normally do. 2 for Ocean's number, please. Sounds right, but is it too cliche? Do people actually say that, or is that just on happy days? What else would you say? "Time's up, we're there." I have to use the only phrase I can think of. It actually goes really well. The message gets across and the guy gives us our tickets without any weird looks. Thank God she didn't want snacks. It would have been impossible to get through. I don't think I have enough space to get into what disgusting mess happened inside the theater right now, or the awkward body pretzel I invented to avoid kissing her the next day at the zoo. But trust me, that it doesn't get much better from here. The fact that I remember this so vividly after 10 years is testament to just how catastrophic this trip was. Story 8. Wrote a condolence letter to a friend when her siblings both passed. I got both names wrong. She opened and read the letter right in front of me. Had to whiz while shopping with my mom at a clothing store, so I was in the changing room stall. Mom got an earful from the manager. I thought in T-ball that the cup they had you wear would hold my whiz if I had to go. Nothing like having your kid whiz himself in the outfield. Was introducing my wife to extended family members at a wedding. When I went to introduce like 3 of them, I all of a sudden drew a blank for their names. I just stood there for like 20 seconds going, I just put my head in my hands and said, "Sorry, I have a headache, please excuse me," and left my wife there for a few minutes. I was doing chest compressions in a patient in the hospital. Nurse tripped and took off my clothes. She tried for a good 30 seconds to pull them back up for me. So many others. So many. I was changing my baby boy, took his diaper off, lifted his legs to wipe him. All of a sudden, I heard gurgling. He was whizzing. I just stood there for a second, perplexed. Story 9. I went to a really swanky Mardi Gras event in Louisiana as a guest and didn't know that the buckets of drinks were ordered per table because people were up and dancing. So I grabbed a drink from a table and was sitting nearby, and my wife nudged me and said, "That dude at the drink table is seriously mad looking at you." I just froze up for some reason. Like, do I face him or just awkwardly stare in every direction but his the rest of the night? I chose the latter. I felt bad and just left the drink where I sat, unopened after like 30 minutes. If I'd just gotten up, apologized, and given it back, explaining the mistake, it would have been no big deal. But as each minute passed, it just got worse and worse. I still think about it while I try to go to sleep sometimes, and the cringe keeps me awake. Story 10. One day when I was in kindergarten, there was a girl that I had a little crush on. At least as much of a crush that a kid can have, I suppose. The teacher summoned us to the floor area, where she sat in a chair to read to us or something. I wanted to sit next to said crush, but she wanted to sit next to her friend. What did my rational child mind do? Cry. Yep, I bawled my eyes out because she didn't want to sit next to me. Naturally, the teacher stopped and asked me what was wrong. After my blubbering story about her rejecting me in front of the whole class, she had the girl to let me sit next to her. Bonus cringe. I forgot to tell my mom that we were doing a show and tell about a theme of collections. So, at the last minute, I decided to take all the Tupperware lids to school. So, for all my class knew about me, I collected Tupperware lids and cried about not being able to sit next to girls. Story 11. In the 9th grade, some older friends asked me to be the keyboard player in their band. My third time playing with them on stage, the lead singer and the guitarist said that they were going to be late, so it was just myself, the bassist, and the drummer. We had to start. After a quick discussion, the drummer and bassist told me that I had to sing, and I begrudgingly accepted it. It was going well, until we got to our third song, which started with a drum solo. The drummer for some reason couldn't remember how to start, so I started playing, hoping it would jog his memory. I couldn't figure it out, so I went on to the first verse. The moment I started singing, I had the worst hoarse voice I've ever had to this day. Everybody stopped and looked at me. I panicked and I left the stage. Even now, 4 years later, every time I'm with someone who was in the crowd or with my previous bandmates, it gets brought up and another part of me passes. Story 12. A female friend of mine, to whom I was admittedly attracted, had been expressing her reservations about an upcoming vacation with her family. Thought I wasn't being overtly presented as such. The trip was meant as a way of re-solidifying her parents' marriage, which had been a touch rocky at the time. They would all be driving from San Francisco to Redding, which is a small town in the middle of absolutely nowhere in Northern California, where they'd stay at a bed and breakfast inn for a weekend before continuing northward for some unknown destination. In keeping with the alleged purpose of this so-called vacation, my friend's parents had booked 2 rooms at the inn. To her dismay, though, my friend discovered that her mother would be occupying one room, her father would have the other, and that she and her sister would each have to bunk with one of their parents. This was worthy of lament in its own, but it was made unforgivably worse by the verbal diarrhea that he offered in an attempt at providing comfort. "Oh, it won't be so bad," I told my friend. "Your father will probably enjoy sleeping with you." A moment passed before I realized what I had said. Then, with a feeling of growing horror, I tried to explain myself. "Wait, I didn't mean it like that," I hurriedly said. "I mean, like, he's probably sick of sleeping with your mom. No, wait, I mean, I just mean that he wants to spend some quality time with his daughter." If I had stopped there, I might have been able to salvage the situation, but as it happened, I decided that the best course of action would be to keep talking. "I can't say that I blame him, really. I'd love to sleep with you. She and I don't talk much these days." Story 13. I was once in a movie theater that was mostly empty. It was me and a few buddies in the third row and a few other people sitting together in the front row. Well, one of the guys in the front row is sipping on ice and is at the end of it where the slurps are really loud and annoying. This seems to be going on for 5 minutes straight. So, getting annoyed and trying to be a show-off and make a really obnoxious slurping sound, to my horror, 2 of the 3 turned to look at me with disgust, and then I can clearly see it's not a guy drinking a Slurpee, but a quadriplegic boy with a tube and his elderly parents taking care of him. It's even more obvious in hindsight that they were sitting in the disabled spots. I was so mortified and embarrassed that I could barely utter, "I'm so sorry," before I bolted out and switched to a different showing. Story 14. I was at the cinema with my boyfriend at the time. The theater was pretty empty and we were on our own in the middle of a row. I got up to go to the bathroom, and on my return, I quickly went and took my seat. I turned to look at my boyfriend, only it wasn't my boyfriend. It was a stranger. And on the other side of him was his girlfriend who was scooshed down in her seat so I hadn't noticed her. And I spot my boyfriend 2 rows in front. I'll admit I was so mortified that I panicked, and as to draw less attention to myself, I sat there for a minute before getting up and going to the bathroom again. Where I took off my jacket, put my hair up, and did my best to look like a different person. I went back in and sat in the correct seat and proceeded to pass away inside for the next hour. As soon as we left and reached the safety and anonymity of the car park, I've never laughed so hard in my life. 14 years later, I still cringe when I think about it. Story 15. One day I went to visit my optician to purchase some contact lenses. I saw a really cute girl behind the counter whose job was to introduce me to some contact lenses and showing me how to put them in, etc., etc. So I already decided that I was going to flirt with her and try to get her number. She filled in some papers for me and I confidently said, "Oh, are you writing your phone number for me?" She giggled and smirked while looking into my eyes, and I suddenly knew that I got this in the bag. Then, are you ready for the cringe? In the middle of her trying to explain to me how to put in the lenses, I pretended to mishear her and said, "Wait, are you talking about the birds and the bees?" With a bold smile. When I say that the lights in her eyes went out, it just went out, man. And her grin just kind of flattened and she just looked at me from an awkward position and immediately turned all professional all of a sudden. The session lasted about 30 minutes with me giving apologetic advances and her just shutting me down. Sufficient to say the least, I left the optician shop with red ears and a sheepish look. To this day, I silently cringe everywhere I go, and in random places just shaking my head. Story 16. In high school, we had this fundraiser assembly thing where students played a game of basketball against the teachers while the rest of the school watched. I was really competitive to the point of being obnoxious. Think of the kid that's no fun to play a pickup game with because he tries too hard. So I'm trash talking and having some fun with one of the teachers. He doesn't like it, so he attempts a three-pointer and drains it right in front of my face. It can't be shown up. When I get the ball, I attempt to do the same thing, except he blocks me. Dude was deceptively athletic for a 5'6", 20-pound physics teacher. I'm even more embarrassed now and start taking the game more seriously. The teacher tried to juke me. I didn't fall for it, but the crowd still was screaming and going crazy. I even heard a black guy voice say, "Oh, goddamn!" I'm extremely embarrassed at this point and need to redeem myself. The next time I get the ball, I try to hoop another three-pointer, way behind the three-point line. It goes in, luckily, and a few students start oohing in the stands. I'm honestly the most excited I've ever been during those 4 years of high school that I yell. I wanted to say, "Yeah, witch!" but caught myself mid-sentence. Couldn't swear in front of all those teachers. The only problem was it all happened in a split second and I didn't have time to think about what to say instead. So I ended up screaming, "Yabba dabba doo!" at the top of my lungs. The cringe I felt like I just got some in the stomach by Mike Tyson. Yabba dabba doo indeed. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 17. When I was in middle school, I wrote a strongly worded letter addressed to my parents, my mom's boyfriend, and several other classmates. Not to be sent, just to vent. In it, along with many other hateful comments, I admitted how I found a large amount of teacher material in my mom's laptop history and asked, "Was it mom's boyfriend's name, or was it you?" I then decided that I was no longer angry, so I disposed of the note. After looking at the shreds of paper all over my room, I decided to tape them back together like a puzzle because I was no longer upset and puzzles are great. I then forgot it on my bed and went to my dad's house. Long story short, Mom went up to put laundry in my room while I was gone, found a note, told Dad, and I got confronted twice about the note at both Mom's and Dad's house while feeling incredibly embarrassed that I even wrote the stupid thing in the first place. Not much, but I still question why I was so compelled to tape the thing back up. Story 18. I was on a second date with this girl when it happened. We had been introduced through mutual friends, and although I felt fairly indifferent about her initially, the first date ended up going great. Cue second date. And after we finished dinner and a few drinks down, we end up back at her place, and as we're getting a bit frisky, the subject turns to what our fantasies are. Well, I let her go first to test the waters of how true my answer should be, and she admitted to being into some fairly vanilla stuff. It was not at all shocking. Anyway, once she shuts up, it's my turn, and instead of just winging it, I thought, who cares? A few drinks down at this stage, I told her exactly what I liked. I went on to describe an incredibly vivid and inexplicably unnecessary detail how I like to imagine that I'm an astronaut in outer space, totally bare floating in my shuttle together with a few other astronauts who are also bare, and how the sounds of us colliding plays like a symphony in my head. I even pretended to be in zero gravity whilst admitting all of this. Safe to say she got a good laugh out of it, but she politely asked me to leave, to which I responded, "Get stuffed. I'd rather have a marathon while watching grainy, dated footage from the Apollo missions than spend another $45 on a date with you, you creep." Not my proudest moment. Story 19. It's kindergarten and we're walking off the stage into a small hallway next to the gym. The hallway leads to the school's lobby, and that's where our parents are waiting. I'm at the head of the line. Behind me are Adam and Ben. They're two particularly talented 5-year-olds. They just had a duet, ABC by the Jackson 5. They just did their solo and returned to their spots on my right. I bowed, turned left, walked out the gym, turned right, and headed down the hallway. Adam and Ben are behind me. Our principal walks towards us. She crouches down, puts up a hand for a high five, and says, "You two are great." I only saw that sweet, sweet five coming at an intercept vector. I leap off the ground, slam that high five, and give a little, "Yeah." I had to take 2 more steps before I processed what he said, and a deep shame overcame me. I walked to my parents and took another step towards a life of constant anxiety. Story 20. This one's a bit of a doozy. I cringe all the way down to my toes when I think about it. It's 4 days before prom. My long-term BF dumped me over the phone, giving the standard responses developed for covering oneself. They're screaming and crying on my end, the "it's not you, it's me" sort of thing on his. Whatever, it's over. I then decided that I was going to prom in spite of him. My best friend didn't have a date, so we decided to have it up for the night to make the administration super uncomfortable. But to make this night everything it was meant to be, we were missing one crucial thing: prohibited elixir. Being the naive teenager I was, I decided to go with the only person I knew I could find on such short notice that would be holding. My newly ex had a friend who owned a record store. I knew he sold some at the back. We were set. Dressed in our finest, most shocking Hot Topic prom gear, we waltz into a fairly busy record store. Walk straight up to the owner and I say something along the lines of, "Hello Dave, it's me. I want to buy some elixir." The guy looks us over, starts laughing and tells us to get your poser selves out of his store and never come back. Bonus, he told my ex told everyone. I became the "can I please procure some prohibited elixir" girl for a while. Story 21. It really makes me cringe and sick to my stomach when I think about how mean-spirited I was towards my little brother growing up. He's a year and a half younger than me. I don't know why I was so mean-spirited. Anytime he wanted to hang out with me and my friends, I'd say stuff like, "Get your own friends," or call him fat boy and other horrible things to tell your younger brother. Looking back on it today, I realized he just wanted to hang out with his big brother because he looked up to me in a way. It breaks my heart whenever I think about how mean I was. Our parents would drill into our heads, "No matter what, that is your brother and nothing will ever change that." I do my best today to show my brother that I love him, but I have a really hard time opening up. It's just awkward for me. But when I'm alone thinking of it, I can't help but get teary-eyed. Story 22. Back in high school, I was really bad at talking to girls I liked. Like I literally could not talk to any girl I had a crush on in person. I had many awkward encounters because of this, but the worst was when I fell in love with a girl I exclusively talked to over AIM and text messaging. I would see her in school and we would not speak, but I felt safe talking to her behind technology. I think she really just felt bad for me. So she would talk to me this way for hours, but it was pretty creepy of me in all honesty. Eventually, I wrote this long text message to her about how I loved her and could not live without her. Little did I know it was just hormones. When she rejected me, we did not talk anymore. It still kind of bugs me to this day that I was just that socially awkward. Fortunately for me, I eventually found a girl that was just as awkward. I actually talked to her in person and have been with her ever since. In fact, we're getting married next year. Story 23. I was in high school and we had a prize-giving ceremony during school assembly. My name gets unexpectedly called out, so I make my way to the front of the hall to collect my prize. I'm almost at the front when I have a sudden crisis of confidence. I think that I must have misheard them. There's no way they called my name, so I turned around, walked back to my chair, and sit back down. My friends are looking at me and ask me what the hell I'm doing, and tell me to get back up there to collect my prize. So I get back up, walk all the way up to the front, and then have another crisis of confidence and think that my friends must have been messing with me. So I turn around and walk back to my chair and sit back down. The hall is silent and the teachers are on stage looking at me like I just landed from another planet. Story 24. Okay, funny/really depressing story. I really liked this girl back in middle school, and so as a crazy preteen, I thought it would be smart to write letters to her. Here's the thing. The letters were encoded with a Caesar cipher, meaning she had to decode it in order to read my message. I kept giving her more letters and letters until one day, one of her friends came up to me and said, "Stop giving her name letters. She thinks that is incredibly creepy." I stopped writing letters to my crush, but I was depressed throughout the bus ride home. It even started raining as I was crying. A few days later, a rumor was started up by a friend of mine that was basically, I go into her name's closets and watch her while she sleeps. It got so bad, whenever my crush was having a sleepover, her friends would check all the closets in her house with her. Okay, how did you know that last detail? Story 25. 3rd grade, group of kids asked me, "Do you still have your V card?" I'd never heard this word before, but I didn't want to appear a fool. I took a 50-50 and said, "No," assuming it was something negative. The boys giggled and said, "So you don't anymore have your V card?" At this point, I knew that this word must have some unsavory connotation, so I asked them what it meant. They kept laughing. I really wanted to know what it meant. I was getting angry as they just kept laughing, so I yelled, "What is a V-card?" And my teacher heard this and said, "Watch your language, boys. Would you like the principal to hear you say that?" Now I was at prime anger. I was an autistic child who just wanted to know what an unfamiliar word meant, and suddenly I'm in trouble. "Yes, I would," I fired back. "Well, if you want to talk like that, you can go see him." So, sure enough, I did. Stormed to his office, opened the door and told my principal, "Mrs. H said that if I want to talk about V-cards, I should come to you." I think he might have just implied that his principal still has their V-card or that he has some preference towards them. Story 26. I got up in front of my high school English class to demonstrate shuffling. You know that dance that LMFAO popularized for like 10 seconds? Well, I was really into it. Watched videos of it, learned some history, thought it was absolutely impressive. I spent like 2 months, probably 8 hours tops, practicing it. One day in English, I was talking about it and someone overheard me and wanted to see it. We weren't doing anything that day, so I got my teacher to play some Garbage House song I heard in the videos I was watching and got up to do it. It was 30 seconds of me doing the basic step back and forth. Just imagine Napoleon Dynamite, but without all the charm. I pass away a little every time I think about it, lying in bed late at night. Story 27. During a game of charades, I once called a larger-sized woman fat. The person pointed to the girl behind him. He was trying to state some phrase that had the word behind it. People started saying she is, and I just yelled out fat. Everyone stopped and just stared at me. One guy says, "What in the actual?" People started laughing. It took me a second to process it because I didn't think I said it out loud. I immediately started apologizing and it really felt so bad. Lane played it off, but whenever I see her around, I know she has to hate me. Man, didn't like that feeling. Story 28. A couple months ago, me and my girlfriend were texting inappropriately each other for the first time. We hadn't seen each other in a while and thought it would be fun to try. I snapped some solid pictures of the twig and berries and started to send them. We were sending pictures back and forth pretty fast. Amidst the texting, I attempted to send a particularly exposing photo that I thought she would love. However, someone had messaged me and it overlapped my girlfriend's pop-up. So without reading the name, I clicked on what I thought was her message and accidentally sent the picture to the person that just messaged me. That person happened to be my dad. I freaked out and in a panic called him. Clueless as to what to say, I awkwardly told him to delete my messages. I knew by the tone in his voice that he was pretending not to know what I was talking about. Story 29. This actually happened today and it's something that springs to mind. I was at a bus stop and there was a homeless guy next to me and soon enough he says, "You got a cigarette?" I misheard him as offering me one and I replied, "No thanks." I quickly placed my earphones back in quickly, realizing my mistake. It was awkward. Then he later asked me what the yellow sign at the bus stop said. I get up and read it. It says the bus stop will be closed for the 93 and 85 buses. I tell him that and sit down, feeling as if I had made up for the previous mistake. Then as soon as I sit down, I kid you not, a 93 and an 85 bus pull up back to back. I was confused and it was clear this homeless guy thought I was incredibly thick. Turns out the date for the yellow sign had been there for 2 years. I hadn't been at that bus stop before and didn't bother to check the sign's date since I thought I'd probably been there loads and had just noticed it. Hence the question. It was even more awkward. Then there was that time I was on an airfield and drove the buggy across the runway to retrieve a glider just as you should. I was brand new at the time. Turned the buggy around to fetch a wheel back at the base and another glider comes screaming past me about 10 feet away, with the instructor just staring at me with anger as he flies past my face. Later on in the day, he asked me to come over and essentially told me, "Don't be stupid in a polite way." It just makes me cringe when I think of how stupid I looked in that airfield. Oh yeah, and when I was a toddler, I called a black woman a monkey. Somehow she didn't realize what I was talking about, and a fat woman so fat to her face. I hate even thinking about it. Oh, the cringe I'm experiencing right now. Story 30. Oh man, so many cringy moments. Puberty was just one big cringe fest for me. I played violin in middle school and the entire youth orchestra used to meet at a local high school every Saturday morning for practice. I was at the age where I was just ridiculously embarrassed by my parents, especially my mom's silver station wagon, so I would have her drop me off pretty early so as to avoid being seen getting out of such a lame car. This was one of those mornings where our conductor was running late, so everyone was pretty much there and just standing around waiting for the doors to be unlocked. In the cold morning quiet, a horn starts honking from the parking lot. Everyone looks over. It's my mom and she's now yelling my name and motioning for me to come over to the car. I was in such a hurry to get over there and find out what she wanted so this freakishly embarrassing scene would be over that I misjudged my footing and tripped over an instrument case that had been laid in the ground. I had nearly regained my footing when another case found its way under my feet. It was a minefield of string instrument cases, and it felt as if I'd stumbled over them forever. But it just wouldn't stop. Managed not to fall, but no idea why I didn't. Probably would have been easier than the derp dance I ended up doing. Story 31. My dad was the announcer for a local small-town hockey team, and I went to every game with him to watch from the booth. I watched how he did everything. Which switches he flipped, how he'd turn up the mic when announcing the goal scorer's name, everything. I was a teenager and there was a small hockey tournament coming up and my dad was going to announce it. I'd watched him for years and I thought I was ready. So I asked if I could do 1 or 2 games. He said he'd let me help him with the first one. It went great. And I did everything right, so he said I could do the next one by myself. He even let my buddy sit in the booth with me. Dad went out and sat in the stands right to let me really have my moment. Stands weren't too packed, but probably 150 to 200 local people were there to take in the game. Second period. About a minute and 25 left. Home team goal scored. I announced it like a pro. I was pretty amped up with everything going on. A little bit of nerves, the game was exciting, doing it by myself, all that. And along with the fact that it was a small booth with a bunch of equipment, so I was sweating. A lot. I turned to express this to my buddy. Exact quote, "I'm glad this period is over soon. I gotta get out of this booth. My sack is like a waterfall. I'm sweating like crazy." All I see is this shocked look on my buddy's face, and it took me a couple of seconds to figure it out, and I whipped my head back around to see the little mic light. Still turned on. Every person in the stands, lobby, dressing rooms, and on the ice heard it. Loud and clear. I can still feel the sick taste in my throat staring at the little red light. I flicked the mic off and my buddy immediately burst out laughing, but I felt like crying. I opened the door to the booth to immediately go and apologize to my dad, and he was standing right there. His face wasn't so much anger, just more like, "Well, messed that up real quick, didn't you?" We laughed about it later, but I knew 90% of the people in the seats. It was a small town, so I had to see them every day. Story 32. My grandmother is a sweet lady, which isn't the most situationally aware. I was with her both times, but I wish it wasn't. Number 1, we were at an Asian supermarket picking up ingredients for dinner later that night. After a long and contemplative silence, she turns to me and says, "These Asians will eat near anything." I immediately shrunk 3 sizes that day, because she did not say it quietly. But I then shrunk 3 more sizes when I noticed that one of the Asian store clerks walked right behind us when she said it. No one was available to ring us up at the register for a while. Number 2, the absolute worst. We were at a hairstylist, my grandfather, my grandmother, and I. My grandmother gets up to get her hair done. My grandfather and I just sit and wait for her. Her hairstylist was a black woman, and as she sat down, she asked her, "What can I call you, ma'am?" My grandmother proceeded to say in a cheery voice, "You can just call me Missy Massa." But I believe even she noticed what she said, because she followed it up with, "That's what my husband calls me." But it was too late. The damage had been done. My grandfather is an old man, but him and I could have qualified for the Olympics with how fast we got out of there. My grandmother is not a bigot in any terms, just not too aware of the social connotations of her thought process. Story 33. When I was maybe in high school, I had a major crush on this girl. I would talk to her every day on the phone. She knew I liked her and she repeatedly turned me down, but I kept at it, thinking somehow I could negotiate and convince her to like me. Then one day I had the plan to make her like me. I wrote a pretty long, really cheesy, not on purpose, I thought it was William Shakespeare, love poem. It's full of all kinds of stupid stuff like beautiful hair as soft as silk and golden like wheat. I read it to her and her friend on speakerphone. She proceeded to laugh hysterically for around 10 minutes. I didn't understand what was going on. Her friend tried to cover up for her by saying she was crying. I figured it out after what was way too long, then hung up and tried to avoid her for the next few years. That story is still the thought that makes me cringe and wake up out of half sleep late at night. I'm 29. Story 34. In 6th grade, I was the tallest kid in my grade and somehow made it to be the only 6th grader on the varsity team. Keep in mind it was a private school, but big achievement nonetheless. My family is not from the United States, and although I had grown up playing basketball with my friends, my dad never taught me the rules of the game, and we never really watched basketball on TV. Anyway, in my 2nd or 3rd game against one of my school's biggest rivals, I've been playing pretty well, and my coach put me in for the 4th quarter. The game is back and forth, and we're leading by 2 with about 20 seconds to play. The ball is passed to the player I was guarding. Everyone and their mother is screaming, "Foul him!" as he gets ready to take a 3-pointer with just a few seconds remaining. Unaware of what to do, I panicked and shoved the kid so hard he flew into the bleachers. Total silence. Technical foul and I'm out on the bench, leaving him with 2 free throws and their ball again. I don't play basketball anymore. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.